Sam, thanks so much for joining us today. Really excited to hear more about you, your journey, and some of your advice and tips that you're sharing now with your audience. So yeah, thank you very much.
It's okay, not a problem. I'm looking forward to it.
So we always like to start looking back and going back a bit in history and trying to work out how you got to the point you're at now. So if we could get an insight, I guess, on your early career or even before that, and your studies and what you kind of wanted to be, and then how that kind of progressed through the early career.
Yeah, sure. So what I wanted to be changed a lot when I was younger, that's for sure. I think I went through a waiter, a pilot. There was lots of things, as you can imagine. But I eventually settled on engineering, actually, chemical engineering, and went to university to do a master's. But partway through that, I sort of realized that it wasn't for me. And I guess actually thinking about it now, that's probably the start of when I started sort of becoming a bit more introspective and self-reflecting and things like that. Because it was then that I thought, actually, I need to change. I need to do something different because, I need to do something that's more suited to my strengths and the way I think. So I switched to computing after doing the master's in engineering, and spent a year or two just moving on to a computing degree. It was after that I realized actually there's multiple routes that I can go down to get into sort of an engineering stroke computing combination. And I thought actually consulting would give me a lot of breadth. So I sort of decided that technology consulting was the sort of thing that I would want to do. And yeah, so I got a job with a small consultancy, consulting in Siebel. So started, I'm a thoroughbred in a way from a CRM perspective and consulting perspective. So I spent 5 years at a small consultancy that punched above its weight and built a name for itself because of the sort of quality of consultant that a consultancy that I was part of. But it was very much a small consultancy mindset. So you sort of have the opportunity and you have to do it all. You have to be talking at a high level. You have to be thinking about data migration. You have to think about the breadth of the technology because there isn't that many people in your team to do that. And then after the 5 years, I got to a level where I sort of thought, actually, I am an architect, or I feel like I'm an architect, but there was this new technology on the block called Salesforce, and then I moved from Siebel to Salesforce, but with a new consultancy firm, again quite a small consultancy firm, at the same time, because I really enjoy that small firm sort of mentality. And then I was there for about 10 years before I joined my current employer. I should probably say, actually, as a bit of a disclaimer, that all of my experiences, all my views, all my perspectives are my own, and they don't sort of reflect those of the companies that I work for or any other entities or anything like that. I feel like I should say that.
Sure. But yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned you were kind of playing all sorts of different roles in the Siebel world. And I was going to ask, like, I don't know much about Siebel. It kind of was before my time of recruiting in this space. Were you like more technically slanted? Like, was that were you more of a developer and then had to pick up the consulting side, or were you more of a consultant and had to learn to code? Like, how did that start?
I think it was a bit of both for me. So I was very technically minded anyway, but the consulting side of things developed more over time, I would say. As with most people, the technical side of things, you learn a lot on the job. You learn by going through certifications and I guess making mistakes as well. both in the technical side and in the consulting side. That's a really important part of it. So yeah, I think I learned both.
Is one more painful than the other when you're making mistakes, like in consulting because you've got people in front of you, or in the technical aspect because people are going to find out further down the line? But because making mistakes is often something people don't want to do, but it's part of learning, right? So did you find one harder than the other when you're making a mistake in front of a customer as a consultant, or just learning to develop and finding your way through that? Was there one that was more painful than the other?
At that point in time, I would say that the consulting side of things was more dangerous to get wrong.
Yeah.
The technical side of things, with technology, to a degree, I've got to caveat that it isn't always the case, but it's frequently black or white. You've either done it right and it works, or it doesn't work. So when it doesn't work, it's a case of, okay, go back, look at the problem again. There's almost always a way of you putting it right. With consulting, if you damage a relationship, that is very difficult to come back from. So I would say in the early days, when I was sort of developing those consulting skills, the consulting side was more of a risk than the technical side. As a junior developer or a junior consultant, you're not expected to know everything. So it's conceivable and acceptable that there may be some mistakes.
Sure. So when you made that transition into the Salesforce space, so you'd already been an architect in Siebel. You'd kind of, like you said, doing a bit of everything. What did you initially start doing as a Salesforce professional?
So again, it was learning the technology and learning it fast, because we were in a consultancy and we wanted to start consulting and providing those services as soon as possible in the technology. So a lot of it was building the credence as an architect in terms of architect skills. It meant looking at the technology as a whole and its capabilities, but then also looking at, okay, what other technologies does it work with? What does the ecosystem look like? What typically where would I fit Salesforce into a company's technical landscape? It was things like that, and it was certainly in the Siebel world, towards the end of that part of my career. It was only at that stage that I sort of realized I was perhaps venturing into architecture, and thinking more like an architect, and and applying more architecture skills than just a developer or a business analyst, or all those other roles.
So when you came across, you as we've said, you were an architect, and therefore you've already built up that knowledge and how to be an architect, even though the technology was slightly different. But in the ecosystem at the moment, I find that people are in a rush to make that leap. So rather than earning their stripes and building that knowledge over time and becoming an architect and then growing into the technology, people want to be an architect as soon as possible. Why do you think? Is that something you've seen, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, so I think part of the reason may be because of the value that's currently placed on architects. I think the marketplace at the moment needs architects. And I think it's because the ecosystem has changed quite a lot. If I look back to 5-10 years ago, what the size and scale of the Salesforce technology set is very different to what it is now, with multi-cloud and it's expanding into a lot more of the behavioral insights and analytical insights that customers interacting with the system demonstrate. So these days everything is connected. Absolutely everything is connected, and that means that the sort of shape and size of it is greater. And because of that, it needs architects to be able to connect things together and decide, okay, where's the best use of this particular feature, or where's the best use of that particular feature. But I also think the architect role has become more approachable over time, and it's certainly nowadays more achievable than it ever was, through the number of certifications that you can get that, that sort of in a more structured way take you through the journey of developing those architecture skills and the domains and the perspectives that you've got to look at, to become an architect. But I will say that, that there's still flavors of architects that, you typically see. And I think there's a misconception that, as soon as you pass the core architect certifications, you're then, ready to take on the CTA review board, and that's a myth, I think, that that needs to be dispelled in the marketplace, as much as possible. There's still, I interact with data architects and marketing architects, and there's still specialisms that are valuable, and it's really about the expertise and the proficiency in that particular domain. The architects, buzzword gets thrown around quite a lot, but what it really is an awareness of where to use technology to solve a broader problem. I will caveat that with, there's still also a need for admins. There's still also a need for functional, people. There's still also a need for, data people, and that's by no means exhaustive. But it's the value that's placed on the architect needing to connect these things together that has become more and more valuable. Yeah,
it's interesting, like your point around the certifications, and I think Salesforce themselves will openly say that. Like, I've been in meetups where like Suzanne Ferguson has said, like, that's just the start of being eligible to start progressing towards the CTA, but there's much more to it than just ticking off that pyramid. And also, I think in the ecosystem, it's like, I feel that people just feel that has to be the progression. Like, you have to be striving towards being an architect, and actually you don't. Like, you can be just a really good senior admin, and there's nothing wrong with that, or a really good senior developer or a technical lead. Like, you don't have to strive towards the goal of CTA, but obviously we do need more architects, so it's good that there are those steps that enable people to get to that point. In your view, how important is career planning? And I know that you've been helping, or you are helping people with their identifying their goals and working towards that. So I guess this ties in nicely to being an architect or progressing towards that point, because having a career plan is probably like one surefire way of being able to achieve goals, by knowing where you're going and how you're going to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Career planning is essential, in my view. I mean, there's no substitute for hard work. You've got that's an undercurrent that goes without saying. The one thing that I would say in your career planning, though, is to be honest with yourself first and foremost, but make conscious decisions as well. If you step from sort of logical step to logical step, because of the expectation of the market, or the expectation of those around you, or those in your company, or your seniors, you're not really making that conscious decision yourself, and because of that, you'll just stumble into roles rather than sort of deliberately wanting to get somewhere, or wanting to develop in a direction that is useful to you, sort of complements your skills and your strengths, and if your heart's not in it, you won't achieve it.
Yeah, you can't do it for someone else.
No. The other thing I would say is that I think it's worth considering that your next certification, or your next achievement, or your next sort of level shouldn't be the end. It rarely is. I talk about making that conscious decision, but it's a direction that you know, and people should think about moving in rather than an end goal, if that makes sense. Because learning never stops, experience never stops. You know, so why should your career either? It shouldn't be badged up like that.
Yeah, for sure. And on the topic of goals, obviously, so you are a CTA, you passed the review board in April. Congratulations, obviously a huge achievement. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort and time, and more than I can ever imagine being able to commit myself. But when did that become a goal, and how has that kind of journey evolved for you over the period of time that it took?
Yeah, so I guess my journey's been quite long. I've been now in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 12 years, just over 12 years. And CTA became a goal for me back in 2014, when I sort of became a bit more conscious that I gathered quite a lot of breadth in my knowledge, but also and the experience, but also I had sort of understood the underpinnings of the technology, so I had a good foundational knowledge as well. So the quote that gets sort of emblazoned is breadth and depth. As a CTA, you could be asked about any question, about any technology that's related to Salesforce or within Salesforce as a feature set. But you could also be asked about, okay, well, how does that work? Under the covers, and that's about talking to, the sorts of people like CTOs and InfoSec people and things like that. So back in 2014, it became a goal. 2015, I took my first review board, and I failed. Back then, I think, well, even now, the reason I wanted to go for it was because of the credence and also the formality of saying, okay, you do have these skills, but it was more for me that I wanted to operate at that level, talking to CTOs. It was and be able to talk to them in a way that meant they could understand what the solution was end to end, top to bottom, back to front, to give them that assurance that it was going to work for them and the problems were going to be solved. So CTA, and all that it embodies was, sort of gave that credence to be able to talk at that level to stakeholders. But it also meant that my intention was always to help other people, whether it be those CTOs, whether it be the COOs, to solve the problems, or whether it be other people in the ecosystem. And a lot of that comes with the credence of CTA as well. My journey in particular has been quite hard, I would say, because I failed multiple times, and part of that has been the impact of failure, which I think is important, but also the motivation, the momentum, the tenacity, I guess, to keep going and to keep striving for to achieve that end, that sort of level.
So how, because I guess you've probably changed a lot over the years of first attempting it to now, and what's your relationship like with failure now, having gone through multiple, more than one attempt at passing, and I guess you have to accept that failure is an option, and how does your relationship change with that over time?
Yeah, so I think one thing I've come to realize is that the way you look at failure is more about your expectations than it is about others. So what I've come to realize, having done it many times before, is that it's become more acceptable as a general a general thing, but it's also about you individually making peace with that. So I know through some painful times that I realize my expectations of myself are probably higher than other people's expectations of me. And what that means is that over time, in the early days, I was trying to meet their expectations, and I was sort of comfortable with that. But the more I've sort of failed and understood myself, the more I've realized that actually my expectations are the ones that I should be trying to, focus on, and not those of others. Yes, there's a level at which people expect quality. That goes without saying. But if my level is higher than that and I'm achieving my level, then I should be comfortable with that. Whether that means failing multiple times to get there, it's okay. Because chances are other people's expectations of me, are already achieved.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
So how did it feel to then pass? Like when you found out in April you passed, what was it relief or just pure joy? Like what was the overwhelming feeling at that point?
I was speechless. Genuinely, I felt winded when I heard the news. But it was, there's so much adrenaline that you that goes through your experience when you're going through such a a sort of unique set of circumstances, which is the review board, that it feels surreal at the time. I can't deny that there was an element of relief because the level of emotion and mental strength and the sort of intensity that you go through in getting there it is significant. It's not trivial at all. So yeah, there is an element of relief, but it's relief in the sense that okay, you've gone through that, and you've come out the other side. Those skills don't go anywhere. Like you've still got them, and they become part of your tool belt to then continue your journey as a CTA. So it's not that you will never experience those circumstances again. You absolutely will. But you now have that sort of assurance and confidence that you can do it, you have done it, and you can do it again. So very much confidence building, very much relief, very much the comfort level.
Yeah, nice. I read your article on your website, and it was like one of the most honest interview, or I guess pieces of content I'd seen from someone in the ecosystem talking about themselves, and like you truly you assessed yourself, right, and you gave what you felt was good and what you felt what wasn't so great, and areas for improvement. And I think like I'll make sure that we link out to that, because I think it's a great piece of content for people to read. But it must have also been quite difficult to write and to put out there, and to be honest about your kind of your self-assessed shortcomings. But why is that so important, especially for anyone that does want to maybe go on the review board and go down that journey? Why is self-assessment and an honest self-assessment so important?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'll say first of all that actually writing it didn't take that long at all. It probably took me about an hour, surprisingly. But I think that's because I got to a point where I'd understood a lot of it already, that it was then just getting it down on paper and recalling a lot of the facts, that I went through. But why is it important? I would say that that sort of honest self-assessment is important, because what it establishes that expectation. The journey to CTA is not to be taken, lightly. And I say that people give up their jobs to do, the journey to CTA. It's that significant. But it's significant because, like I say, it's a unique environment to be in. That's not to say you won't be in it again, but it's quite a unique one as a test to be in, with the time constraint and the sort of breadth and density of technical knowledge that you need to articulate in a very short space of time. But if you don't look at, I think if you don't look at the way you operate and what makes you tick, and how you think, how you react, how you feel when you're going through some of these experiences, then you can set yourself up to have an expectation of both your capability and what you can achieve that just may not be realistic. And what that means is that, in my view at least, is that whilst you have this inner voice that is telling you that you have to achieve a certain level, you're not balancing that with the reality that is, okay, you operate in a particular way, so maybe your expectations need to change, or maybe there's a different way of achieving it. So I struggled with the perfectionist side of things, and I then battled with the perfectionist side, with the fact that I felt a lot of people already considered me a CTA, therefore I had to achieve it. So there's a lot of pressure there. So that just kept me trying, in the early days of my journey, trying to spend every waking moment either studying or practicing or thinking about the technical content, or how to achieve the presentations and things like that. It was all consuming. But that meant that if I didn't look at myself and think, actually, what I've given up to try and do that is the very thing that balances my thought process out. So it's exercising, it's taking time out to relax. All of those things actually complement and help you to think clearly. So I was sort of putting hurdles up in front of myself, but without realizing it. So it's things like that that I think you have to sort of look inwardly and take a step back and objectively consider, okay, why did I make that decision? Or why am I struggling to do X, Y, and Z? I think I said in my article that there were times where I'd say, I would talk to my wife, and I'd say something and she just wouldn't respond. and I was thinking, okay, give me something back, am I making sense? Is this sensible? Is it anything? But what I came to realize is that she could see I wasn't talking to her. I was actually talking to myself.
Yeah.
Right. And I was sort of trying to clarify things in my head, but also reassure myself that actually it's okay to find it difficult. It's okay to not be able to make a decision in one particular area or another, because it's hard. So it's things like that. So the inner voice is ever present, and you've got to listen to it. That is what will sort of guide you, but you've got to realize that it is there, and it is, and there's something that's going on. That will help you set realistic expectations of yourself, and ultimately both of those things plus a shift in mentality will help you succeed. So it is absolutely critical that you sort of look at yourself and self-assess.
And obviously now I think that's something that's come to you over time, right? Because if you went back to 2015 or when you started that journey, I guess you would do a lot of things differently now with that. Now that you have reflected on all of this, so what would you change if you started your journey again?
I think I said it before. There's no substitute for hard work. You've got to put the hard work in. There's lots of people out there who will share knowledge, and it's about taking that knowledge in. But ultimately, it's your journey. So I believe that if I was to do it again, I would sort of think about, okay, what's my journey? How do I work? What's my motivation? How do I maintain my enthusiasm, and my that momentum over time? But also realize, and part of my sort of mission, if you like, is to bring awareness to a lot of this, because the sacrifice is real. It's absolutely real. And I talk to people at the moment about their stars aligning for success, because there are so many forces in taking on this journey that can compete against each other. Something has to give in order for you to get there. So what I've learned is that you've got to be realistic, but you've also got to be honest. The ramifications these days as well are also more significant than they were. What I mean by that is the current program has introduced a formal stage gate called the 602, or the candidate evaluation stage. Now, what that means is that there's a formal checkpoint that if you pass, great, you're sort of on your way and you're within months of the final board as a mark of readiness. But if you fail, then you can't schedule another readiness assessment for another 6 months. And then after that, if you do pass, you've got another 2 or 3 months at most before the review board. So if you think about the overall timescales, that's at least 9 months, at least potentially 12 months, potentially, of sustained momentum, sustained enthusiasm and motivation. That's not easy to achieve. So for those who are embarking on their journey, it's I go back to that conscious decision. Unless you're making a conscious decision and a commitment to undertake that sort of level for that sort of period of time, then you'll be okay to get there. If you're wavering in any way, you're going to find it a challenge. That's what I would say is the biggest learning point.
So do you think you just that earlier on you didn't I guess it wasn't kind of apparent as to how much commitment you would need to make to get them? Because I think back then you felt technically strong enough to pass the review, but otherwise you wouldn't have gone for it. So it wasn't the technical thing that you felt was lacking right back then.
And I think that's common with a lot of people, is that they've got the technical knowledge. There are so many people that I've encountered along my way that I think, wow, they are incredible. Their knowledge is incredible, their depth is incredible, their ability to apply it is incredible. There's a lot of impressive people out there, but I do believe that what isn't apparent and there isn't a lot of awareness of is that journey. It's the personal journey. And everybody's different. Everybody will have a different journey. Some people will find parts of it easy, like the motivation. Some people will find the pace of it too much. So
is that your mission now? Now you've achieved it, to kind of spread that awareness. How are you kind of hoping to help and share that knowledge to people that may be even starting their journey now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. So, as I said, for a long time, I've sort of built a wealth of, technical knowledge and experience working in many different sectors. So I'm always learning on the technical side of things. That never stops. I've said before, the journey never ends, fortunately or unfortunately. And also, there's a lot of intelligent people out there with a lot of knowledge who publish a lot of the technical material. So podcasts and blogs and so on, and that is still part of the the development path. But I think what complements that, and it's part of my mission, is combining that technical side with the sort of the wellness and the well-being side of things. Mm-hmm. So bringing awareness to and helping with those areas where people need to, need some help, need to talk, need some guidance, need, in some cases, just the question being posed to them, in that particular, struggle area or difficult area, to help them think and to help them gain clarity. So my sort of ambition is that I can complement a lot of the technical knowledge in the ecosystem with a lot of the well-being side of things. Mental health, so important these days. And technology has a part to play in that as well. So coaching and mentoring is absolutely where I'm going. And it's not, that's in addition to my normal, working life. It's not to replace that by any stretch.
Sure. Well, you've got some time in your diary now. You've passed to some gaps to fill. So, and I think that's really amazing that you're doing that. And that's one thing I often see with CTAs. They've hit that goal and now they want to give back. But I agree, what you're looking to do is different to that that kind of offering that we hear out there more regularly, which is the kind of technical consulting and coaching. So I definitely think there's a valuable service there for people out there. And if anyone does want to reach out and kind of find out more about, your journey or kind of picking your brains on their journey and where they're potentially finding some gaps, where's the best place to contact you?
Probably the best one is probably on LinkedIn. So you can find me, I think it's linkedin.in/Sam Wadhwani. Or Twitter, so at accessible is there as well. But both of those links are available on the website that I've started, and I'll caveat again, it's in its infancy, so it's developing as we go. But both of those links are available there. So www.theaccessiblearchitect.com. You can get them there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I've really enjoyed the chat, and it's real. A different kind of conversation that we've had with CTAs in the past. I think one that's definitely needed in the market. So really appreciate you sharing your journey and being really real with us and honest around how that journey panned out.
That's my mission. None of us are infallible. We're only human after all, as a famous singer said. It's been great. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.